I told you this was a mistake. We've got to fix it now, before it's too late. There's no other way out of this.
The meeting room was on the 14th floor. Men in suits sat around a table worth more than a fortune. They had gathered for a routine takeover until the elevator doors slid open. A black man stepped inside. His calloused hands placed down a single file.
Excuse me. I'd like to know exactly who you are.
My name is Elias James Monroe. 22 years ago, your bank foreclosed on my family's farm. Today, I own your bank.
No, this can't be right. No, this is impossible. Impossible.
Before we get to what happened in that boardroom, we need to go back, way back, to a red dirt road in Harlan County. Elias Monroe was 8 years old and had never once doubted that the land belonged to them. 412 acres of black Mississippi soil, stretching from the tree line at the north end all the way down to the creek that ran copper-colored in the summer heat. Cotton, soybeans, sweet potatoes. A peach orchard his grandmother had planted in 1961 that still bloomed every April like it was showing off. The house sat at the center of it all. White clapboard tin roof, a porch that wrapped around two sides. His grandfather, Roosevelt Monroe, had built it with his own hands in 1953. Took him 3 years. He'd told the story so many times that Elias could recite it word for word. Started with nothing but 40 acres and a second-hand tractor, Roosevelt would say, settling into his porch chair, the one with the armrest he'd carved smooth from rubbing. Everybody told me a black man couldn't own land in this county, so I just kept buying more of it. Roosevelt Monroe was 71 years old and had the constitution of a man who had never once allowed the world to decide his ceiling. He woke at 4:30 every morning, walked the fields before sunrise, checking soil, checking plants, checking fences. He knew every inch of those 400 acres the way you know a person, its moods, its needs, its stubbornness. Elias followed him on those morning walks from the time he could keep up. This soil, Roosevelt told him once, crouching down and pressing his palm flat against the earth, is the only thing in the world that doesn't lie to you. You put work in, it gives back. You neglect it, it shows you. No politics, no prejudice, just honesty. Elias pressed his own small hand into the dirt beside his grandfather's. Is it ours forever? Roosevelt looked at him. Long as we protect it. They didn't know then what protecting it would actually require. Elias's father, Thomas Monroe, ran the day-to-day operations. Quiet man, deliberate, not given to speeches the way Roosevelt was. He kept the books, negotiated with buyers, managed the equipment. He was the reason the farm actually turned a profit every year while half the farms around them didn't. His mother, Ruth, taught school 3 days a week and kept the household the other 4. She was the one who made Elias read. Every evening at the kitchen table, history, science, math, whatever the library had. She believed in education the way some people believe in weather, completely, without needing to argue about it. The land feeds your body, she told him. Books feed everything else. Elias was an average student who became a serious one the year he discovered economics. He was 12. Something about the way systems worked and the way money moved, the way power concentrated, the way institutions were built to serve some people and grind down others, lit something in him that didn't go out. He read about redlining, about the history of black land loss in the South, about how between 1910 and 1997, black Americans lost approximately 90% of the farmland they had owned. He brought the book to Roosevelt. His grandfather read the pages Elias had marked, set the book down, was quiet for a long time. That's why we don't borrow from Harlan, he said finally. We never borrowed from them? Not once. Your great-grandfather tried 1948. They told him the land wasn't worth what it was worth, offered him half what a white farmer with half as many acres would get. Roosevelt shook his head. We found other ways. Saved longer, moved slower, but we never let them hold the note on what was ours. What Roosevelt didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Thomas had. Elias was 17 when the drought came. 3 years of it. Not dramatic, not biblical, just relentless and quiet, the way real devastation usually is. Yields dropped, then dropped again. Equipment broke down, and the repairs cost more than the season's return. Thomas Monroe did what he believed any responsible man would do. He went to the bank. Harlan County Savings and Trust, Gerald Harlan II behind the desk, a handshake loan they called it, a line of credit against the property, enough to cover 2 seasons while they rebuilt. The interest rate in the paperwork was not the interest rate Gerald had described in the meeting. Thomas didn't catch it. He trusted the handshake. He'd grown up watching white men in this county be taken at their word. He wanted to believe he'd been extended the same courtesy. He hadn't. By the time Elias was 19 and home from his first year at Mississippi State, the debt had compounded to a number that made his stomach drop when his father showed him the statements. Thomas had been paying, every month, on time. But the structure of the loan meant the principal barely moved. They were feeding interest while the debt stood still. Elias spent that entire summer at the kitchen table with the loan documents spread out around him. He found 4 separate violations of federal lending regulations. He drove to a legal aid office in Jackson, waited 3 hours, sat across from a lawyer named Patricia Okafor who read the documents carefully, asked sharp questions, and then looked at him with an expression that he would remember the rest of his life. Not pity, fury. "This is predatory lending," she said flatly. "They targeted your family specifically. These terms were never disclosed properly. This is actionable." They filed a complaint with the State Banking Commission. The commission took 14 months to respond. By then, Harlan County Savings and Trust had initiated foreclosure proceedings. The legal process moved faster than the complaint. The morning the sheriff's deputy came to post the notice, Roosevelt Monroe was sitting on his porch in his chair, the one with the worn armrest. He watched the deputy walk up the path with the paperwork. He didn't speak. Didn't argue. Didn't call out. He just put his hand on the armrest and held on to it. Elias watched his grandfather's face in that moment, watched something in it go somewhere private and deep where no one could follow, and made a decision so quiet he didn't even fully hear it himself. Not forever. Just for now. Roosevelt Monroe died 8 months later. The doctors called it heart failure. Elias knew better. You can only watch something you built with your hands get taken from you so many times before the body decides it has seen enough. The farm was auctioned. A property developer from Memphis bought 412 acres for 60 cents on the dollar and turned it into a subdivision called Meadow Creek Estates. The peach orchard was the first thing they cleared. Banks don't fail dramatically. They fail slowly, then all at once. Harlan County Savings and Trust had made a series of poor commercial real estate loans in 2015 and 2016. When the market shifted, those loans went bad. The bank's capital reserves, never particularly strong, began to erode. By 2021, they were under regulatory watch. Their stock, once held privately by the Harlan family and a handful of local investors, was quietly restructured to attract outside capital. Elias had been watching for 12 years. He had a file on the bank 3 inches thick. Quarterly reports, regulatory filings, loan performance data, property records. He understood their balance sheet better than most of their own board members did. When the shares became available, he moved. Not hastily, carefully. He built his position slowly over 18 months through 3 different holding companies, so no single purchase triggered disclosure requirements. Patricia Okafor reviewed every transaction. "This is legal," she confirmed, not for the first time. "I know it's legal," Elias said. "I designed it that way." By March of 2023, Elias James Monroe held 53% of Harlan County Savings and Trust. He called the board meeting himself. He wore the suit his mother had picked out when he made his first real money. She'd driven to Jackson and chosen it herself. Navy blue, well-cut, understated. "Don't walk in there looking like you're trying to impress them," she told him. "Walk in there looking like you already won." He set the folder on the table. He slid the acquisition document toward Gerald Harlan III, who was the same age as Elias, had inherited his grandfather's chair on the board, and had the particular expression of a man who had never once imagined this moment was possible. "This can't be right," Gerald said, turning the pages. "It's right," Elias said. How did you—" "I saved," Elias said simply, "and I waited, and I learned how money works, which is something your bank spent 40 years making sure families like mine couldn't do." The room was very quiet. The bank's CFO, a careful man named Dennis Pruitt, spoke first. "Mr. Monroe, what exactly are your intentions for the institution?" Elias opened the folder. "I intend to run a bank," he said, "the way a bank is supposed to be run." The first board meeting under new ownership lasted 4 hours. Elias came with a restructuring plan that Patricia Okafor and a team of consultants had spent 8 months developing. Comprehensive, detailed. Built around a simple principle: a community bank should serve its community, all of it. The first policy change: loan officers would be required to document the objective basis for every loan decision. No more discretionary character assessments. The coded language that had allowed generations of loan officers to approve white applicants and deny identical applications from black ones. The second change: the bank would create a first-generation homeowner program with fixed, transparent rates for buyers who had never owned property, specifically targeting families in the county who had lost land in previous generations. The third, an agricultural lending division, staffed by people who actually understood farming, offering terms designed for the realities of agricultural income: seasonal, variable, vulnerable to weather. Gerald Harlan III resigned from the board on the second day. 3 other board members followed. Elias replaced them with a retired federal bank examiner, a woman who ran one of the largest black-owned farms in Alabama, and Patricia Okafor. The local newspaper ran the story on the front page. "Monroe takes control of Harlan Bank, promises new direction." The comment section was predictably divided. Some people were furious. Some were cautiously hopeful. Some wrote things that reminded Elias, if he needed reminding, of exactly why he had spent 20 years doing this. He didn't respond to any of it. He was too busy running a bank. 6 months after the acquisition, Elias drove back to Harlan County. Not to the bank, to the land. Meadow Creek Estates had not been the development dream its Memphis investor had imagined. Half the lots had never sold. The subdivision sat half-built at the edge of what had been the Monroe farm. Concrete foundations, a few finished houses, long stretches of overgrown lots. The developer had gone bankrupt in 2018. The land had sat in receivership since then. Elias had purchased it 3 weeks before the board meeting. He had not announced it. He parked at the edge of the property and walked in through the old north entrance, the one Roosevelt had always used. The fence line was still there, partially fallen. The soil was still black and good beneath the weeds. He stood at the place where the peach orchard had been. There were no peaches, no trees, just open ground, sunlight, and the faint sound of the creek running somewhere to the east. He stayed there for a long time. Then he drove back to town and called his mother. "Mama, I need you to come see something." She came the next morning. He drove her out himself, the same way Roosevelt used to drive the property lines every spring. When she understood what she was looking at, she pressed her hand to her mouth. Her shoulders shook once. Then she straightened. "Your grandfather," she said softly. "He would say something about this." "What would he say?" She thought for a moment. "He'd say the soil was waiting." Elias looked out across the land. "Then let's not keep it waiting anymore." The Monroe Agricultural Restoration Project broke ground the following spring. Not a subdivision, not a commercial development, a working farm, 320 acres returned to agricultural production, managed by a cooperative of 12 black farming families from across Harlan County. The remaining 92 acres were preserved as a community land trust permanently protected from sale or development. In the center of the property, on the exact footprint of the original house Roosevelt Monroe had built in 1953, they constructed a small agricultural education center. White clapboard, tin roof, a porch that wrapped around two sides. On the wall inside the entrance, a framed photograph. Roosevelt Monroe in 1961, standing in his peach orchard, hand resting on the trunk of a young tree. Beneath it, a single line carved in wood, long as we protect it. The bank's first-year results under new leadership told a story numbers rarely tell cleanly. Loan approvals for black applicants in the county had increased by 61%. Not because standards dropped, but because the evaluation process finally removed the variables that had never been legitimate standards in the first place. 14 families received first-generation homeowner loans at terms that were, for the first time in the bank's history, identical regardless of race. 3 young farmers who had been rejected by every lender in the county received agricultural loans through the new farming division. Within 2 years, all 3 were profitable and current on their payments. The regulatory watch was lifted. The bank's capital position improved. It turned out that serving your whole community was also just good business. Patricia Okafor was named president of the board. 23 years ago, she said at the announcement, a 19-year-old kid brought me his father's loan documents and I told him it was actionable. He said he'd be back. She paused. He came back. Elias Monroe didn't buy that bank to get even. He bought it to get right. There is a difference. Getting even is about the past, about making someone feel what you felt, about flipping the table that was flipped on you. Getting even keeps you facing backward. Getting right is about the future. Roosevelt Monroe spent 40 years building 412 acres from nothing. He didn't do it to prove something to anyone. He did it because the land was honest, and honest work was the only work he trusted. Then a bank took it. Not with violence, with paperwork, with interest rates buried in fine print, with a system that had been designed carefully, deliberately over generations to ensure that black wealth in this county had a ceiling and a trap door. Elias didn't rage at the system. He learned it. He learned it the way you learn a language, not to translate it for others, but to think in it, to dream in it, to eventually become fluent enough to rewrite it. He spent 22 years becoming someone who could walk into that boardroom and set a folder on that table. And then he spent the next years using what he'd built not to live well above the people who'd been wronged, but to reach back down. That first-generation homeowner program, that agricultural lending division, that cooperative farm on land his grandfather's hands had once turned. That is not revenge. That is restoration. Here is what I want you to sit with tonight. The soil that built the Monroe farm is still there. It was there when Roosevelt pressed his palm into it in 1961. It was there when the developer's machines cleared the peach orchard. It was there when Elias walked back through that north entrance alone. Soil doesn't forget, and neither did he. If this story moved something in you, if you needed to hear today that patience is not weakness, that the long road can still arrive somewhere, do me a favor. Hit that like button. It costs you nothing, and it means everything to this channel. Share this video with someone who is in the middle of their 22 years, someone who is building something the world can't see yet, someone who needs to know that slow and deliberate still wins. Subscribe and hit that bell. Because every week we come back here and we tell the truth about what ordinary people are capable of when they refuse to let go. Now I want to hear from you. Has someone ever taken something from you that you spent years quietly building back? Tell me about it in the comments. That story deserves to be told. Because here's the thing about people like Elias Monroe, like Roosevelt Monroe, like every person who keeps working when the world says there's no point. They don't make noise. They make moves. And one morning, the boardroom door opens and they walk in, and everything changes. Remember that. The bank thought it was holding the note on his family's future. He held it longer.